Walking along a path at the roots of Pikes Peak, you take a fork in the road towards the Anselm Society digital pub. Inside is a raucous conversation on the arts, faith, and, well, whether naiads are water spirits or tree spirits. Ask Evangeline and Mark if you would like the answer. In the corner by the fire are 3 people. One of them is expressing delight that the chocolate on the table is the same color as the cover of the new Why We Create book, and that would be me, your host, Christina Brown. Welcome to Believe to See, a podcast of the Anselm Society Arts Guild. Here at Believe to See, we explore the relationship between faith, art, and storytelling. Our goal is to connect the great story, the great stories, and our own stories so that we can better understand what it means to live with a Christian imagination. Speaking of chocolate, Why We Create, Anselm's newest and inaugural book, is a collection of essays exploring the idea of creativity in the hearts of humankind, what it says about who we are, and what it says about who God is. For a deeper delve into the concept of this book, you'll have to listen to our episode with Brian Brown, director of the Anselm Society and one of the editors of this book. Now, we've done a number of interviews with the authors of Why We Create, but this one is different. Today, we will be discussing a chapter written by a beautiful author who is now sharing that beauty with a company of saints on the other side of the veil. After a long and excruciating battle with cancer, Leslie Bustard, author, poet, and co-founder of Square Halo Books, our publisher, passed away before she could see the fruits of her handiwork that we hold here in our hands. The topic of her chapter, gratitude, the foundation of human creativity. And it's even more profound for me now because I am blessed to have known and worked with Leslie on a number of different projects. And I can tell you that she was every bit as saint-like as her chapter makes her sound. Although I'm sure she'd blush and deny it with those twinkling eyes of hers if she were to hear me say that. So today I'm here with our co-hosts, Mandy. Hello, Mandy.
Hello.
And Evangeline. Hello, friend.
Hello.
And we are going to do our absolute best to give this stunning chapter the justice it deserves. You two ready to dive in?
Ready as we'll ever be.
Absolutely.
Okay, wonderful. Well, Leslie's chapter begins part 2 of the Why We Create book. The first chapters, the first part 1, dealt with the theme, God creates. And Leslie's begins the section, We Create. As I read through the book in order, because I'm definitely anal about such things, I found it significant that gratitude is the theme of the chapter in this section, the inaugural chapter, like the first chapter. Theologically, I think that's like spot on. I was kind of wondering, did you guys notice that or notice kind of the same thing or pick up on that?
Well, I agree with that being the basis of everything theologically. Everything in the entire universe. But you know what she talks about everything being a gift, the created universe, our own gifts. When you look at everything through that lens, it literally changes everything. So, yeah, I think it's no accident and not a misstep whatsoever to start with that lens, to start from like gratitude as the foundation.
Right, and I mean, that's the title of her chapter, The Foundation of Gratitude, the Foundation of Human Creativity. And I definitely think that's true because if that's sort of the springboard from which we create, it's out of joy, which is just a different flavor of gratitude, I think.
I like that line.
Yeah, and if we don't realize what we've been given, then I feel like that's when we're static and stunted. But it's when we do realize whatever it is that we're grateful for, then that creative impulse within us is sparked.
Well, it's funny because like it's so easy not to be there.
Oh yeah.
You know, we like all agree and know from firsthand experience that gratitude is the best place to start anywhere. Like, you know, anywhere in your day, anywhere in your creative journey. And yet, let's be honest, like how often am I there when I'm in, you know, like I have my laptop open? Am I grateful?
Yeah.
You know, probably not. Even if I'm not actively ungrateful, that's probably not the first thing in my head.
Right.
You
Our eyes tend to land, or our attention tends to be geared toward what needs to be fixed.
Right. Or just, I got to get this done, or just a million other things other than being grounded in gratitude. It's so easy not to be.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. And I love one of her her chapter heads here in this chapter says the story starts with giving, and it talks about. But we'll get there in a minute. But for those who haven't read the chapter yet, I'm obviously not going to give the whole thing away, but we really want to give you a taste of what's coming in this book so that you can read it for yourself. So in the beginning of her chapter, Leslie opens with her cancer diagnosis. She remarks that she's always been someone who's sought out beauty, and when she told some of her friends this news, they actually asked her a really hard question. And I remember when I read that, I was like, oh my gosh, how would I respond if my friend said that? Like, it's really hard. It's not like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. It's like, well, actually, yes, but how are you going to respond, you know? So in Leslie's own words, she describes it, quote, how would I, who has continually sought after beauty in my everyday, ordinary life, continue the quest when the road turned into the valley of the shadow? I feel like that's such a profound question. It's one that I've always wondered if I'd have the faith to answer should I someday get a similar diagnosis of a slow death. So anyway, I'm probably not the only one, but Evangeline and Mandy, have you guys ever kind of thought through like what your response would be if you got that kind of diagnosis and you know, a friend would say, so how are you gonna live?
Right. I think I have not really thought of it just sort of out of the blue necessarily, but just sort of that question. But it has been in my experience, and us as guild members, we have guild members who have passed, and we have observed them in the way that they lived those last days. We have 3 guild members who died of cancer.
Yeah.
Could I just say their names?
Oh, please. Yes.
Yeah, so we lost Stephanie, and then we lost Chris Jager, and then in the middle of 2020, and then we lost Hudson, and Hudson had been actually on at least one podcast for Believe to See. And I believe their ages were, Stephanie was in her 40s, and Chris was in her 50s, and then Hudson was 24. And all of them knew they were dying before they died. And so the model of them in, like, just watching them walk that road, they each did it differently. But I do feel like they each drew closer to God in different ways. And I think as far as this question, as far as looking for beauty, literal beauty, I would think I saw that most keenly in the way Chris walked her last years. Just because she was a visual artist probably is why. So she literally was capturing what she saw in her watercolor paintings, and then she would add words to them as well. But and I remember one of the last paintings she did was just a little bush with little sheep, and she wrote a little sort of verse on the side about the shepherd's voice and coming when you hear the shepherd's voice call. And I just remember thinking, I was just astounded at her ability to see the beauty and hear from God in that way, in the midst of knowing that this was likely one of the last things that she would paint. And I can't really put myself there. I don't know how to answer, would I respond in that way?
Oh, no, I mean, yes.
Oh, I know that's not what you were asking.
Right.
But that is sort of the question that their lives ask.
Oh, yes.
Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
And so,
yes.
So as soon as you see Stephanie, who is full of laughter,
Yeah.
full of laughter,
Yeah.
right? You spent, Evangeline, the last
Yeah.
You spent more time with her toward the end than I did, for sure.
Yeah, I was privileged to be there a couple of days before she passed.
Yeah, and she got to see her oldest daughter get married, and she was just sucking the joy.
She was, and she, wanted to be just with her family, and, there was just, she had such a joyful face, and that never changed, even when she lost, some ability to communicate. Her face was still so joyful.
Yes,
so,
her eyes were so...
Yeah.
Yeah, and they didn't lose. And then Hudson was just such a force of reason and faith and theology, and he never lost the passion for that. And so it makes you wonder, like, what would I do? Would I be able to be grateful for the time that I've had as I see it?
Well, and the time that I know I'm going to have and know it's much shorter than I'd like.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I think it's a gift in and of itself to know, like, deep down that what you would choose to do would be, spending time with people you love, and for probably the three of us in this room, chasing beauty, which is what Chris did, and which is what Leslie's, choices were every single day, to pursue beauty. And I, yes, I have thought through that. And it's a whole lot easier to think about your own choices and your own facing mortality. Because I can like, I want to go here and see this, and I want to do these things, and, maybe experience these plays or whatever it is that's, beauty to you. It's a whole lot harder when you're thinking about your child.
Right.
So thinking about shepherding someone else through that, that's a different ball game altogether.
Right. Well, that's interesting that you just said what's beautiful to you, because I'm sitting here thinking, like, Hudson wasn't sketching sheep, because that's not how God and Hudson, that's not how God made Hudson. God made Hudson. Right. God made Hudson to love knowledge and understanding and articulation and story, and that's what he just really sunk himself into,
and blessed others with his work.
Oh, 100%,
yeah. No, I mean, and that's what Leslie did too, and I feel so blessed that in my relatively young, relatively young. Everyone, did you hear that? Relatively young.
Yeah, you're relatively young.
Thank you.
I could be your mother, so yeah.
Barely. Just
Go ahead.
Barely. Just hardly, barely, ever. Nearly.
Ever nearly.
Oh, I love
Ladies and gentlemen, a new word.
A new word, thank you very much.
Nearly. We heard it here first.
I think we just wrote a poem. Hardly, barely, ever, nearly.
Yes.
I love that. That sounded sort of like
Look for the new collection of poetry.
Yeah.
We'll dedicate this one to
That was
Leslie.
kind of Longfellow-ish.
Oh my gosh.
Yes.
Actually, yeah, very good. Well, ironically enough, I was going to say that well, actually, I forget where I was saying before this, but what I was going to say was that Leslie did the same, and her response was creating poetry.
Yes.
So, and anyway, so that's funny that we created poetry. So that's why we're going to name this one in her honor, whatever this nary thing is.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
But I think that's cool because
in honor of Leslie.
I think that really is like a loving challenge to us, because here we are thinking, we're sitting here thinking, what would I do if I knew I was going to die in a year or two?
Yeah.
Well, wait a minute. Maybe what we need to do is, if we were able to think of that, then perhaps that's a challenge to not wait until, unless we find out that we're going to die in a year or two. Do you know?
Yes.
What I'm saying? Okay. So if I can I think that is a worthy question to ask ourselves. Like, if I only had a year or two left, what would seeking beauty look like? And then, okay, well, now I'm going to do that, even though I might live 40 more years.
Yeah. And seeking beauty is never a waste of time.
Right. We shouldn't wait till there's a deadline.
The thing that catches me too about this is if we think like we've only a year or two to live or whatever it is. I think of the country song that everyone that became very popular. I'd go skydiving, I'd go Rocky Mountain climbing, and that's all well and good. But if you are really, really sick and you can't do much, like especially like cancer does, you can barely like get through each day. And how do you take that attitude?
That is a really good point. How is this guy who's dying riding a bull named Fu Manchu? Wait a minute. I never thought of that.
I have never heard this song.
Oh, don't.
I have no context.
Don't worry about it.
You know me. I don't do country music.
It's fine. It is not something you need to do before you go.
It's a catchy tune. It's catchy.
Before it is. You don't need to do that before you shuffle off the mortal coil.
It was not on my bucket list, and I will not put it on there.
Okay.
Yes. Well, yeah.
It is a catchy tune, though.
It is a catchy tune. It is. But it's funny because the whole like attitude of gratitude thing like really gets me like annoyed. But a lot of cheesy things do. But the thing here the thing about attitude is kind of like there's a relation to like attentiveness. And so what are we attentive to? Because that's going to affect our attitude, right?
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, so much better because it brings meaning to a phrase that has just lost meaning because it's a cliche. Yes, right. Attentiveness. I love it.
Oh, thank you. Well, I loved it because Leslie says, daily attentiveness and gratitude became my way of seeking to, quote, cooperate with holy grace in every moment of my existence. And that last part of that quote was I do not know who it was. It's in the footnotes of the book. I did not write it down. But anyway, it was just such a beautiful way as she goes through this chapter saying, I wasn't able to do much, but attentiveness was what I could do. And like dedicating myself to beauty, to thankfulness, to watching. She uses the phrase coram Deo, living in the face of God. Like it was just beautiful. And you think about being really sick and you sit there. What else can you do? You sit before the face of God. You sit in his presence. You sit, you notice things. Anyway, so the thing too that really gets me is a lot of people kind of say, like we've talked about this a little bit already, but like, well, be grateful for every breath you breathe because you never know when it's going to be your last. And I think, that's true, obviously, but that can really irritate me because the connotation is kind of a bitter one.
Yeah, that's like a threat.
It is.
It's looming. That's more of a looming statement. That's not an encouraging statement.
No, it's like a heed ye, kind of. But it's bitter in the sense of like it doesn't do justice to who God is. It doesn't do justice to a God of love and care and who has given us time as a gift as opposed to, like not a shackle, like a punishment, right? Like a lot of us kind of, and me included, used to think that, when in the Genesis story, when Adam and Eve were put into a garden, their physical death was a punishment. But I'm not so sure that that's quite theologically accurate. And so I think the way she kind of talks through this in her chapter makes it so interesting to ponder the idea that our days are a gift. Teach us to number our days, Lord, that we may gain a heart of wisdom. It's not God saying, haha, pay attention, it's coming, you better wake up, honey. That's not how God is.
But that has like a sense of being chased.
It does.
Like you're being chased by time, so make sure you use it.
Yeah.
It's the sand through the hourglass.
Yeah.
And there's, how can anybody relax or even be attentive or, or appreciate the moments with that? It's an oxymoron.
It is an oxymoron.
Yeah.
And I think in that oxymoron, you get this skewed version of who God is. And so I love, and for our listeners, we're posting an interview with Jane Charles, who was actually the other editor of this book, Why We Create, but also did a chapter on time. And she actually gets into kind of this concept of time and eternity, and whether it's a gift or a curse, etc. So I encourage you to listen to that episode when it comes out, or if it comes out before this, I don't know. I'm not sure what the order is yet. We haven't figured that out. Yeah. But all that to say, I think back to Leslie and her chapter in gratitude, the way she takes her own specific life circumstance and directs it in a theologically healthy direction is exemplary. Yeah. Let's see. What do you think about the poetry that she cites? So she has a lot of great quotes, some scripture, some theologians, some pastors, and some poets in her chapter. What do you think of Gerald? I always say Gerald.
I know, Gerard Manley Hopkins.
Am I the only one who does that? Gerald Manley Hopkins? I'm not the only one? Okay, good. Whew.
No, I've never thought of him as Gerald.
Oh, so
sorry.
That's okay. I always say William Carlos Joseph, even though it's William Carlos Williams.
That is funny.
Oh, that is
He literally has the same name twice.
I have no idea. So I think Gerald is a little more understandable.
Well, I always go Gerard.
Gerald.
Manley. Yeah, anyway, sorry. It's fine. Gerard Manley Hopkins.
Yes, I got very excited as I...
Oh, yes.
I don't know about you guys,
Always.
but sometimes when I'm really excited about what I'm reading, my eyes will like jump down to see what's coming next.
Yeah.
nice.
Yep.
And
Mine do that too.
Nice.
Well, not really, but I sometimes if I do it too much, I will literally have to like put my hand on the page.
Oh,
and
that's
calm
hilarious.
down, Mandy.
I have done that too, so that I
Awesome.
wouldn't read ahead. Yep.
I know. Anyway,
You guys do this in fiction books, or you do it in
both. Just if I'm
Whatever.
excited.
Okay. Yeah, when you're
If
like,
I'm
can't wait to get.
Can't wait. Yeah,
Oh, okay,
exactly. And then I'll be like, no, go back. But when I saw in the book, obviously the formatting gave me a clue that a poem was coming. So my eyes were like, woohoo! And they jumped down there. And I knew, like, because I'm familiar with that poem, Glory be to God for dappled things. And I was like, Gerald! No, I'm kidding. kidding.
I appreciate that. I
You're
like that.
welcome. That was for you.
I know.
But yeah, I just, this is the kind of poem that you just have to read like multiple times because it's...
Of course. Yeah.
This is one that Michelle Hindman taught in her class, Wrestling with God, just this summer.
Yes.
So the
now
name
Michelle
of it
Drake,
is-
but yes.
The name of it is Pied Beauty.
Is Pied Beauty by
Pied
Gerard
Beauty.
Manley Hopkins.
Yeah.
One of my favorite things about this poem is that he is taking speckled and spotted and strange and imperfect things and celebrating their beauty. And it just flips the, expected framework.
Yes.
To allow you to see the beauty of imperfection or not even imperfection, just difference, just variance. You know?
He's not even celebrating those speckled things in spite of their speckledness, but because of their speckledness.
Exactly.
And I was actually
yes.
talking to some friends the other day about how both my favorite kind of horse, and theirs as well, is a roan. Are you familiar with strawberry roans and blue roans?
No.
Okay, so strawberry, I'm sorry to all you actual horse people out there, but a strawberry roan is I think it's chestnut and white. Again, I'm really sorry to all the people who know about horses, including my daughter Emmy. But it's the reddish color of horse and the white, and the blue roan is a black and white horse, but the colors are so blended as to be indistinguishable from far away. And so if you've ever seen a horse that looked blue or pink, that's a blue roan or a strawberry roan.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
And that's what I think of when I see Pied Beauty. Yeah. So the roan is like the most unique and it's because of their weirdness, not in spite of, but it's because of that oddity that gives them that special spark of beauty. And it's almost, you think of God like kind of laughing as he's creating that kind of beauty.
I love that.
There's like laughter in it.
I think of my blue healer.
Yes.
She's called a blue healer because the white and gray speckle together.
Well, there you go. She's a roan.
She's a horn.
Something
else.
A roan horse.
She's
making up words all over the place.
She is a pied beauty, is what she is. Who has a barking problem, but we just won't go into that.
So
She's trying to tell you how pretty she is.
Yes.
Sorry, what?
Oh no, I was gonna say. So do you think Leslie pulling that example was a good one? Do you think she made her point with that?
Oh, absolutely.
Or part of it.
Because I think, so the core, I think, of gratitude is what I learned from Leslie, because I did learn from this chapter for sure. I feel like what she's saying is gratitude is unconditional. Like,
Yeah.
you look at what's in front of you and you say, this is what God has given. And
it is good.
And it is good. And if we can't understand the good, and I know there's a phrase now, spiritual bypassing, which I try to avoid, where you're like, if someone has, like when I had a miscarriage and people were like, well, but at least you know you can get pregnant. I'm not saying that kind of thing, okay? I'm not saying there is not grief. I'm saying there is. And that, I think, is the key and why she chose this specific poem. It is the imperfection and the marred thing or the marked thing. There is beauty in that because we know who holds it all together. And we can still acknowledge and see. You don't need to be like, that those freckles aren't there. They are there, and they're part of what makes that face beautiful.
Yeah.
You know?
Do you remember, I'm remembering talking with KJ Ramsey earlier this year about the suffering and finding joy even in suffering. And she was talking about experiencing the cross.
Yeah,
with
that's a
Christ.
podcast we did earlier. So listeners
listen
should
to
Go
that.
back and listen to that one too.
Absolutely. And by the way, pray for KJ because she's not doing well right now. But
yeah, so anyway, she talked about the experience of suffering with Christ and even the joy that can be found in that. And it's such a hard thing to explain and talk about because because sometimes people want to bypass and just put a pat answer on suffering. And this is not that. This is so profound and so deep that we don't even have words to express it adequately. So it's like the opposite of the, pat answer. So that's her chapter reminded me of that, and her use of pied beauty just brings home the practice of attentiveness. It is, even for a word lover like me, every single word choice. And, Michelle can talk about his sprung rhythm that he invented, which is uniquely him. But, just even the word choices are careful and deliberate and so beautiful and so attentive to language, to the image that he is creating. So I think it's like the perfect encapsulation. If I were to try and write a chapter like this, which I could never do, I would just say, go read Pied Beauty and go read Leslie's chapter. And then there you go. I'm not going to try.
That's awesome. It's good though. Yeah, it's so true. And she says here, Leslie says, when she's answering that question, kind of partly again from her friends, when after her friends asked that and she was thinking through it, she said, quote, "The quiet of this time and the uncertainty of my cancer led me to pay close attention to what was all around me. I determined beauty was going to be my companion and God would be my sustainer. And I sought, in the midst of all the uncertainty and pain, to receive his gifts with open hands." That I thought was just wow. The kind of attentiveness / attitude or whatever you want to call it that it takes.
Posture. It's like a posture.
Oh, it is. To be able to do that and to follow through. Which she did to the very end of her days. This was who Leslie was. This was
And I need to read, there's another author that she quoted a lot. I can't find his first name, but it was Piper, P-I-E.
Oh, Joseph Piper.
Okay.
Yes.
I have not read him before, but I need to.
He's so good. I've only read a tiny bit, but he's...
But one of the quotes that she included was this one. No one can obtain felicity by pursuit. This explains why one of the elements of being happy is the feeling that a debt of gratitude is owed, a debt impossible to pay. And so I think we as humans, we think that positive emotions are wholly separate from negative emotions.
Oh, that's so interesting.
And positive circumstances are wholly separate from negative circumstances. But that is not the world God made.
Yeah.
That's just not the world God made.
It's not, and part of that is because he's actively working to redeem the bad in it. So of course they're going to be mixed. Of course they're going to be intertwined.
Right.
Of course there can't be sort of the negative and positive, and the plus and the minus, and like the magnetic fields like repelling each other. That's not how it works. They're so deeply intermixed and intermingled that, like on a molecular level.
Yes.
That's what I was thinking of when we were talking about the idea of, that threat, like, and live every moment as if it was your last, or, whatever the implied threat in that misses the entire arc of redemption, and, the idea that he is redeeming this world that we are inhabiting now, and our lives as we go through it. And, it's just such a myopic look at our experience as human beings.
Yes.
And when you open it up and consider that death is not the end, that changes everything.
It changes everything.
Well, what if we considered every moment as if it were our first? How about that? Or I think more broadly, I think what you're actually saying, so not to belittle at all, but is every moment we need to be attentive in every moment, regardless of its chronology.
Yes. Yeah.
Here I think comforted.
Yes.
I think comforted by,
because
we are going to have moments that aren't great.
Right.
But those ones are not irredeemable, and they're not, they're not a waste of our time and his time. They're, they can be redeemed as well and healed as well. So, Yeah,
I heard it wasn't quite as hard. I think it was a podcast, and I don't remember who it was, so I will not, which is probably good because I'm going to botch it anyway, botch the reference. But I heard a podcast where a theologian was being interviewed, and he said the thing that angers just like Satan the most is the fact that even the things that Satan has tried to do to mess things up, God makes better.
Right.
So the fact that even the things that look like even grief themselves, sometimes if you can look carefully, you can see things that came out of the grief that would not have come if the grief hadn't occurred, or the happenstance or the circumstance or whatever it was. And so the way this guy referenced just the fury of Satan at that, and how if you could imagine, being so angry that you try to do something and someone else is always one-upping you.
Right.
In that sense, I'm trying to destroy you and you're making it better every time I do.
Right.
It's not just leveling the playing field. It's not just saying, no, you were thwarted. It's nice try. Also, I'm going to use that. Thanks.
Yeah, right.
That's a terrible way of. I'm trying to put it in human speak, because that's
100. No, I totally understand what you're saying.
Yeah, it's crazy. So, but yeah, all that, I think in Leslie kind of understood that, in a way that a lot of us still kind of struggle, because we don't have the limitations and the forced attentiveness that she cultivated.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think, and the other thing is, I think we always have to remember that when we are not able to see something to be grateful for in our circumstances because they're just too dark, we can tell God that.
Yes.
And that is the astonishing goodness of God, is that he will hear that, and he will not reject that, and he will not belittle that, and he will not say, come back to me when you have,
a better
changed your attitude. Exactly.
When you have your attitude of gratitude.
Yeah, because Peter and I, my husband and I, we do a little a class at a home for sheltered, a women's shelter. And we asked them just the other day, this is where the conversation about the roan horses came up, actually. Nice. But we asked the women if it turns out God exists, because they're not all sure of that yet, what would you ask him? And one of them, she had been like the entertainer, like the super happy, funny girl, and her face totally changed, and she said, I would ask, why me? And she said, why did I have to be the victim? Because she went through some really horrific stuff as a child. I don't have answers for that.
Yeah.
I'm not going to tell her, oh, but your experience as a child was beautiful, don't you know? No, I'm not. I'm not going to say that. I don't understand that. God gets that, and that is the beauty and the wholeness of who God is that she, and I pray that, over these next few weeks as we get to know her more, that if she can minimum just learn that she can go tell God that she doesn't get that. That in itself is beautiful. Yeah. That he will receive that, and he grieves with her, which of course she doesn't know that yet.
Right.
But he grieves right alongside her.
Yeah. It makes me think of the idea that beauty is only in things deemed, like we were talking about earlier, the whole, the perfect, the spotless little lamb or whatever. And we've had plenty of conversations about this. We don't need to go into it. Right. But, seeing beauty in a suffering face. And that's maybe something that artists encounter or are more open to. The beauty in things that are not traditionally deemed beautiful.
Well, and I see beauty in this young woman because she's now a mother of a beautiful little girl, and she's a fierce, protective, wonderful mother for her little girl. Yeah. And I would never say something like, well, what you went through made you a better mother or anything, because you can't, that's the thing. It's unsearchable and it's impossible to articulate with human speak, as you said,
with human speak,
Christina.
Right.
Yeah. And I think that is why we're constantly compelled to create and make art, and we're trying to just get a glimpse or convey a glimpse for others of what we're seeing in the midst of all this pied beauty and all these scars.
Yeah.
Amen.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that's actually a really good segue to the end of the end of our podcast, the last question. So Leslie kind of talks about her creating out of this attentiveness and this gratitude, and she received a gift that she did not anticipate. She argues that gratitude is actually the foundation for creativity, and it glorifies God and serves his people. And that's how she kind of pulls it in at the end. And I was wondering, what do you guys think about that?
Well, yeah, because as you were saying that the special gift that God gave her was that she always had written poetry, or she'd always loved poetry.
Yes.
But in the midst of her cancer,
yes,
she actually began to write it. And so that inspiration and just the spark and the ability to create that came out of suffering.
Yes.
I absolutely agree. It kind of goes back to the quote that I said before, that one of the elements of being happy is the feeling that a debt of gratitude is owed.
Yeah.
And not to say that being happy means you're going to create, but maybe it does.
It's helpful.
It is helpful.
In the process. I would say, like I did earlier, talking about intellectually and spiritually, it's easy to say, yes, gratitude is the foundation. But practically, that's not how I feel like I create out of scarcity these days. I always feel like I don't have enough time, and so I'm not starting with thankfulness. But anyway, I'm going to try that. I'm going to try to to just start my teeny little writing time that I have stolen from my day with gratitude and see how that goes, because I think it's a truth, but it's not yet one that I have grown into. So I have some growing to do.
That's interesting that you say that, because when you post on Instagram your little sunrise pictures, because the way you're stealing time is waking up at the crack of dawn.
Yes.
God bless you. And so you have your little 5:30 a.m. writer.
5 a.m. novelist.
5 a.m. novelist. I see gratitude in those posts that you share, because you are taking a moment to notice the sky and the sunrise, and you're snapping a photo of it and you're sharing it. So maybe you're not like totally in tune with that, but I think you're more attentive maybe than you even realize, because you're passing gratitude on to me.
You're probably right. I do that, and I think you should not be outside on your back deck taking a picture of this, sunrise.
Okay, well, give yourself permission to do that, because apparently you're following that impulse.
I am.
You're following the impulse.
I'll be sitting there in my my family room writing, and I see the glow, the pink glow across the window, and I'm out of my chair and in the back on the back deck taking a picture.
So you have been thinking of that as an interruption, but it's not at all. I have.
You're right.
It's
look
not.
at that, you guys. Thank you, Leslie.
So smart. Yeah.
And look, I have a perfect poem to illustrate just this.
Go, girl.
Okay. So for those of you who don't know, Leslie Bustard, as we talked about, became a poet through the suffering, and she has a collected work. It's called The Goodness of the Lord in the Land of the Living, Selected Poems by Leslie Ann Bustard. And this one is perfect with this moment. It is called The Bird Out My Window. I keep returning in my mind to a bird I saw yesterday. She sat still on the topmost branch of a nearby tree, made leaf empty by a late autumn rain. Of all the places to perch, this bird chose the thinnest, loneliest twig. With no other birds nearby, she tightly held her own against a white sky. Her weight, or a slight breeze, caused the branch to sway. With a tilt of her small head and ruffle of feathers, she looked side to side, content, so far away from solid ground. I keep wondering, is this what it's like to be a sparrow in God's eyes? Peacefully perched up high, confident that letting go will not result in free fall? I recall looking away for a moment. Then she was gone. Yeah. And there you go. Absolutely beautiful. Those little moments, that attentiveness, that just so good. Mm-hmm. So my friends, yes, that is a worthy collection of poems if you want to read. And I will just close with a word from her own book, her own chapter rather, sorry. Although she is co-publisher, so she founded the publishing a house that published our book. So we can kind of say her book, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
There you go. So she says this, she says, and we know that in the death, resurrection, and ascension of Jesus, our life is hidden in his, and we have more than we know for which to be grateful. And there it is. Things are winding down now at the Anselm Society Digital Pub. The fire is down to embers, the customers are trundling home, and you've polished off your final glass. Once again, Believe to See is a podcast of the Anselm Society Arts Guild. To find more about the Arts Guild and the Anselm Society, please visit us at anselmsociety.org. And while you're at it, please rate and review the show on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you again for joining us, and we'll see you next time.